It's fun. It was just a, I don't know if it's his attitude about the world. It's kind of like a young man or 60s swinging kind of thing where,
it goes beyond that because he refers to women as it.
Oh yeah, he does that weird.
He's a horrible misogynist.
He's a horrible misogynist. In an era where that was kind of not exactly okay, but was common,
Well, he's also supposed to be working class, right?
Yeah. Well, there's that.
But what does
pull out his Cockney accent?
He's Cockney, working class.
What does he do? He never seems to work at all.
Oh, he's a driver.
He's a driver.
Not just chauffeur, because apparently they have trucks as well. Right. If you see that.
Yeah,
he's a driver. And that's that one day he had the rolls.
Right.
So he gets different cars and drives them around for people, and they
when he stole the girl.
From
the trucker.
But I agree with Tad. I mean, obviously there's a lot of a bit dated stuff, misogyny. It's funny because like this is the second time I've seen this movie, and at first, especially in this day and age, the misogyny and the sexism comes on so strong at the beginning. But then you start to obviously the movie knows this, and they did this on purpose as well. But you start to really understand him and the world that he's in, and obviously there's so much more to this film. The script is really, really good, and it starts to open up and be, and give us real human experiences, obviously. And of course, we're going to talk about how it all falls back on him, of course, which is the point of the film. But even before that, and even despite that, sort of the growing that he does, I think, as a person and as, as the character. But also I think that aside from, definitely there's a lot of like he is a piece of shit in many ways, but he's also very kind and he's definitely charming. He's kind in different ways. He's caring in different ways. I mean, obviously, like the obvious one is with the son. And also I think he's not, I don't know. I think a little misogyny is okay. I think he's not wrong sometimes.
Right. Oh.
in a lesser film, the stuff with the son would have been the climax of the movie.
Yeah.
Like it would have gone along and he would have been that way, and then she would have had the kid, and then he would have been the good dad, and that would have been the end of it. The thing that this movie gives you is the not happy ending. You don't get to keep having the child. Right. It doesn't matter that you grew. Right. The damage that you've done is already done.
Right.
And you lose the girl and you lose the child to the dorky guy because he was the one who was kind and you were not.
Yeah.
And I should say, I should clarify, because we record this and one or two people watch this, I don't think misogyny is okay a little bit. What I'm saying is I think sort of sometimes it's okay to look out for number one. And I think that sometimes that's what Alfie was doing.
Well, I think he was a young man, kind of like, it's kind of a Wild Oats thing. He was kind of in an era where men did this, where they had conquests and it was never ending and they didn't commit and they weren't forced to. It was a sexual evolution in the very early days of it, where he could go and kind of like, have a different girlfriend every weekend. It was unusual, 10
Which
years
is
before it didn't
interesting
happen.
Because the play that it's based on, that the guy who wrote the screenplay is also the playwright, it takes place at the end of World War II.
I didn't know that.
Of the 50s, yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's what I was just going to say, Jim, is that sexual revolution, whatever, men have always been like this.
Yeah.
Well, but there was a big,
well,
there was a
the dogs huge, at the beginning and the end,
There was a huge,
moment.
There was a huge increase in misogyny and in societal misogyny after World War II, because all of these women had gone out to be in the workplace while the men were off fighting the war, and
people of color.
Yes, and people of color. Less in England, but sure. And then after the war, they needed to get the women out of the workplace and the men back into it. So that's where you get this 50s housewife shit. That's where you get the slamming of that door, and you get this societal pushback against women. So him, who would have been a child raised by a post-war, maybe a little bit during the war family, would have grown up in a household where the woman was very much to be at home, to be the mother type thing, or at least that's what you were supposed to be, you know. So
Well, it's too bad they couldn't. It's too bad they couldn't figure out a way to just add the men into the workforce alongside the women.
Yes, that's what they should have done.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you know that
Well, part of it was economics, right?
well,
And the big question, of course, also part of it is, you know, motherhood, because in this movie addresses that too, where, you know, the woman has to leave the child with a different woman throughout the week and then just see him on the weekend so that she can work. These are more complex problems, you know?
Yeah. I guess back then, you know, things like that, you know, kind of government childcare didn't exist. You know, maybe there's like more evidence in nuclear family, but they certainly did take good care of people with TB, didn't they?
Well, you know, it's the National Health Service started up like in the late 50s, early 60s, you know.
I mean, I want to be taken to a nice big villa somewhere for 6 months.
You want to be taken to the set? You want to be taken to the set of The Prisoner?
Pretty much. You know, okay, I'll recover from illness there.
Yeah, and I want to fuck all the nurses.
Exactly. It was just like
I was going to say, and be wheeled around in a wicker wheelchair, but I mean, Jared's thing is okay too.
and smoke cigarettes on the lawn.
No,
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Smoking cigarettes while recovering from lung disease.
You're not supposed
my
to.
doctor said I could only have 5 a day when I
5 a day. I would have another one.
There's not a lot of really great laugh lines in this movie. That is a great laugh line. That's definitely one of those like, oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Also, the most obvious thing is that this was, of course, Kane's, you know, breakout. And we see every single reason why it's up on.
Wasn't Zulu before this?
Yeah, Zulu was his first one.
It might have been. I think Zulu might have been 64.
But I think this is the one that put him like international star.
He opened this film
because Terrence Stamp wouldn't be in it, and he spent 2 hours trying to convince him to do it, and he said no, and he said, okay, fuck it, I'm doing it then.
Yeah, it's because Terrence Stamp did the Broadway for that whole run.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
And then they asked him to do the film, and he turned it down. But they were roommates. They were roommates.
Oh, okay.
So Michael Caine was like, I'll fucking do it. I mean, and but my point is that how good is he here? He is tremendous.
He is quite good.
Yeah,
I don't know if I've ever seen him better than this.
He pulls off mugging to the camera without actually mugging to the camera. Well, you seem like you're just there.
Well, that fourth, you know,
one of the first movies to break the fourth wall.
Yeah, it is one of the first big ones.
Well, I looked that up too, and actually, the first one was in like 1938.
Oh,
and there's actually been a long history of, but they've only been like small scenes,
right?
And it was never like the full character.
Well, Groucho in A Night at the Opera.
Yeah, Groucho,
he always talks to the camera.
Right. So Groucho was on there, but this is kind of the first feature accessible wide audience
with the fourth wall integrated narrative with the story.
Right. It's just totally.
A scene will go on. He'll stop and turn and talk to the camera, and Michael Caine sells it. He's just got that amazing magnetism.
The part with the doctor where he says the son's name instead of 99, and she says what, and he goes, oh, sorry, 99, and then goes back to talking to the camera. That's another one of those great, okay, his internal monologue is starting to come out now.
Right.
And
I have loved Eleanor Braun ever since Bedazzled.
Oh my gosh,
she's
great.
Exactly. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, Eleanor Braun was. I know. I saw her. I was like, "Oh, is something fun gonna happen now?" And it didn't. But I was hoping for something fun to happen. But it was just it was a neat film, and
this was also nominated for like a ton of Academy Awards.
No fooling. Well, that's great, and it did have a nice,
like six. Yeah,
but it had a great and gritty, real feel to it too. You know,
well, that was one of my only complaints actually. Is the opening of this movie is cinematography wise is so incredibly ugly. Like it's just like the most drab. Like I know it was the '60s and the late '60s, but it doesn't look good.
The whole movie
doesn't look very good.
It's pretty drab and dreary.
Yeah, it's like they got. It's like they got the best film stock they could, which was maybe like the bottom rung of what was available that year or something.
Like old Pathé color or something like that.
They didn't know how to light. It just this movie looks quite bad.
No, with a critical eye, the cinematography was very basic. It was shot in scope just so you could kind of keep him in the frame. but there was no magic to it. There was no magic framing thirds. There was no depth to it. It was just, it could have been filmed and
There's no depth. There's even the color though. The colors are
and
not,
the colors were just it was not creatively done. It was just 45 lighting through the entire thing. It was nothing special about it.
Obviously, it's so good we don't even notice that after a while. We overlook that. That's just like one negative thing.
But like I said, the settings themselves, the places where they filmed it, I thought were fascinating.
But I think I think the alley scene with the dogs, everything glows really nicely in this. And maybe that's the HD cleanup. Maybe when they went through and they HD'd this, like they did some of that. They made it look a little bit nicer. But there's definitely scenes in this movie that I feel like you get that sort of cinema glow that I think is good. I think it makes it a little unreal. And for a movie where the guy spends half of it fucking talking to you, it being a little unreal, I think is perfectly acceptable.
Oh, some of the Twilight scenes on the Thames were really well done. I mean, just beautifully, you can tell they had the time.
Except it kept going from midnight to.
Well, they tried, they tried. Yeah. Probably most people at the time didn't notice either. So, but it was.
Yeah, because they were color timing this by like looking at it. They're like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Do you think, and this is kind of an open question, do you think if this film had not had the fourth wall thing, it would have worked?
No.
It wouldn't have been that, because this goes back to the other kitchen sink.
It'd be a totally different film.
Yeah, it would have been different. It would have been a much darker film, I think.
And it wouldn't have, it wouldn't. I mean, that's the charm of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
This is great too.
That's a good.
That was a good shot. That cinematography moment was spectacular. Because actually, when I'm watching that, I'm saying, I know where the camera guy is, but yet that's still very smart.
Yeah,
very smart.
I think it actually is dark, even though we all, people were just now saying if it wasn't for the voiceover, it would be very dark. It is a pretty fucking dark movie.
You come to the end, it's heartbreaking.
I'll tell you, it didn't quite fit the niche that I had sort of put this movie in. Just my first time seeing it. It didn't fit the niche I expected. I expected him to be more sympathetic of a character, more charming, so he would be more like of a lovable rogue, and instead it was like, God, this guy is fucking awful.
I think that's Kane's natural. I think that's Kane's natural charm coming out.
This is what I wanted to happen to this fucking guy.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again.
Wow.
But I think
Sheila said, I'm surprised I don't hate Michael Caine, because this is one of the first things I ever saw.
So when I started dating Gloom Girl, she pointed out to me that this is one of her favorite movies. And so we watched it together. And this was like, I don't know, 30 whatever years ago. And I don't really remember the reaction they had to it, but I will never forget the reaction I had to it this time, which is I wanted this guy to be eaten alive by bugs. I wanted him to be thrown into a wood chipper.
Yeah, right.
Slowly.
Yes.
I could not get past, I don't know what it is, but this was a real tough watch.
Yeah.
I fucking hated this guy.
He's a terrible person.
And then the movie, like, okay, now I'm going to be supposed to be sad about the fact that, the baby scene and that Shelley Winters does to him what he's been doing to everybody else this whole fucking movie. Like, cry me a fucking river, dude. Womp womp. No,
that's what Tad was saying.
Everything about
right. That's what I was saying about a lesser movie having that as the climax.
Yeah. Right. Tad brought up one of the best things about this movie is that when Alfie hurts people, that hurt is real.
Yeah.
The
damage is done. And at the end,
every time you refer to a woman as it, I winced.
Yes, sir. For sure.
But the narrative, this script is so brilliant because when it comes back at the end, he doesn't get that. He doesn't get to get off.
He does not. He doesn't deserve or get a happy ending.
I understand.
But the thing is,
it's of its time. But like 30 or 40 years, however long, 50 years since this movie came out, I could not cry a tear for this guy.
I didn't at all.
I was disappointed that it wasn't more painful for him.
No, there's a narrative cycle going on where he will do some terrible thing, then he'll charm you, the audience, back by talking to you.
Yeah,
he keeps doing that. He's like, oh, he's so charming, he's so glib,
and definitely a seducer.
And he goes back and does another shit thing, and he goes back and gets you back again. He's playing with you.
I agree with Scott. I agree with Scott 100%. That's exactly what he did. He'd be a piece of shit, and then he'd come at you, and you'd be like
directly at you. I mean,
nah, man, he started 6 feet under and never crawled out of that hole for me.
Yeah,
Really? You didn't think that? You didn't think
Not once. No, I could not.
Wow.
No.
You didn't think the scenes with the
hated
child? Dude, I almost cried at that scene where he was talking to his child and telling him to go to sleep. Maybe because I'm the only dad here and I have a
No,
boy.
I wanted to
But,
throw
like-
him to a bunch of wild dogs.
Yeah.
He had a special bond with that kid, and I was touched by that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That
We're
bit
talking
with
about how he charms, the people around him and also the audience.
mostly
there
the
was
audience.
Something
Mostly the audience.
Yeah.
well, okay, so to me, like the point where he's really shows the most vulnerability is in the post-abortion scene where
Yeah.
he cries,
Right.
and that affected me.
Mhm.
But then immediately, and I was waiting for him to turn to the camera, and I thought, oh, they're not going to do it now. They don't have a way of. They don't have a way in right now because he can't be sort of self-reflective and comment on himself right now. He's being
Yeah.
himself.
You have to
But
leave
then
him
the very
straight in the
next
narrative.
scene,
Yeah.
He's with his friend and he's telling him, and I got really sad about it, and blah 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 blah, and it was like almost diffused it for me.
Yeah.
Right.
the-
Exactly.
The center of the film with the girl from Sheffield, where he kind of basically kidnaps her. I'm not sure exactly how that works.
Grabs her and then she's cleaning his fucking floor.
I know, but that was, I thought, the most heartbreaking segment of this entire thing. And she loves him and is devoted to him and is doing all this stuff. And she's from a relatively small town compared to London. And she wants to make it big. And she thinks, that he takes care of her. She's going to take it. And he never took care of her.
I didn't understand that either, because I was like, I thought he was just going to like sleep with her and then that was going to be, but no, he kind of like took her in as a weird girlfriend.
Yeah. It was
She
just
cooks
odd.
and cleans.
But at the end, she gets hurt. I mean, bad. I mean, it's like,
she does leave him. That
Yeah,
was
she
her
does.
saving
Well,
grace.
At some point, she has enough.
And he runs downstairs and tries to ask her to come back. I changed my mind.
Yeah.
I love my cocaine, but the years have not been kind to this movie. At least.
Well, no,
So,
the
I mean,
attitudes are pretty raw in this film.
I want to comment. I want
Go
to
ahead.
comment real quick on what John said earlier about it not being where he'd put it in his mind before watching it. And I think the reason is Michael Caine. I think Michael Caine has this innate charm and he's such a good actor that as time passes after you see it, you sort of replace in your brain what you saw with your impression of him as a person, not him as a character, him as a person.
Right.
And you're so enthralled by his performance and by what he does that people have put this character on a pedestal when they should be putting the performance on the pedestal.
Well, in other words, Michael Caine.
I don't disagree with that.
The Michael Caine meta
that's
character, the superstar Michael Caine. That's where we're kind of filtering it as.
Because I agree with you both, because I think that you do remember the charm and the funny or like the fun, but it's a lot heavier than it seems. Because I didn't remember that it was this heavy either. And then when it got really heavy, I was like, oh, this is a much more sophisticated picture than I remember.
More substantial than you thought it was.
Well, and anytime you look this up, it says like comedy drama.
I know
it's
like, that's the
this is not
thing.
a comedy.
No, it's not funny at all.
It's not.
Right.
And he's not that charming, you guys. I didn't think. I mean, his behavior was so terrible, and we didn't get to see
but
much.
I think that. But here,
I'm not saying Alfie's charming. I'm saying Michael Caine is charming.
Right.
Correct.
I think Alfie is absolutely charming. It's one of the only ways he can get away with all this shit.
The reviews,
like, in a direct
wildly funny scene. It's marvelous.
In a direct
like,
way,
Yeah, but those people thought it was funny to call women it.
Yeah,
right.
But he was funny. He was charming in a direct way because he would charm you.
I will say that I will say that, maybe some of the tone or attitude or writing and language in this movie did not age well. And yes, for sure. But I also think that this follows the line of what we call the anti-hero.
Yeah.
And this follows the line of I love to see movies where people are deeply flawed, because that is the best way to explore humanity. And it shows us, these other, like, it explores what it's like to be human and to
It's a-
experience.
I don't
bad
think
things.
I don't think this movie thinks it's a comedy either.
No.
Oh,
I
don't
think
so either.
people right. So, but that's the thing about all of these rave reviews saying it's so funny is there is this dissonance I think that's going on where the movie knows he's bad and the movie punishes him for being bad, maybe not to the extent that some
No.
people would want him to be, but the movie
Chris.
punishes him for being bad, and you get to experience that as an audience.
Well, he never
with his fucking roommate who's dying of whatever emphysema, whatever in the fucking hospital.
But he never fucking raped anyone or beat up anyone or he didn't do the kind of bad shit that some people do.
But I'm gonna go with
That doesn't make him a good person.
No,
I'm gonna go with what
I'm
Jim
gonna
said.
put that on Alfie's tombstone.
Yeah.
At least
I'm backing up.
Never raped or
There
murdered
are,
anyone.
but we could all agree that there are degrees of evilness. There are degrees of bad. There are levels.
Yeah.
And this guy may be a piece of shit and a bad dude, but he's not evil.
Also,
I'm backing up
No,
Jared on this
I'd
one.
say he's evil.
This is a movie about a flawed human being, and
He's
this
pretty
talk
fucked
about
up.
the human condition in a very
he's
direct
pretty
way.
fucked up. And also,
Yeah, I
on the
mean,
note
Idi
of it-
Amin was a flawed human being too. Like,
Exactly.
how
Yeah, he was
far
also
do we want to
cannibal.
take
He was just a little
flawed?
more open with the whole eating people thing. He just was kind of okay with it.
How do you know that Michael Caine hasn't eaten someone in this movie?
Hey, you know, he was a starving actor in his day. I'm sure that it might have happened.
Can I pick up the thread of this not being a comedy and say that I sat like a rock through that barroom brawl scene.
Yeah, that was bad.
So that's the funniest part of the movie to me.
That's actually the biggest sign of the times, I think, for me. Because it
They had to have a scene like that in it.
Yeah, it had to have
There you go.
right in the middle. It has to have this farcical, dumbass. Like, why did everyone start fighting? That was
The chair-
That was
what
ludicrous.
Because that's what always happens in barroom brawls in movies, is that people just randomly start punching each other. Once
This
the fight
stool
starts.
coming flying in and her just sort of moving out of the way.
That was
as it-
actually-
like
that was-
this happens every week. Like
Kind of a Wild West fight. I'll just go by why I picked this, because I wanted to get a kitchen sink realism film in, and this seemed like the kind of I think now it's a little displaced in terms of my hopes for it. I thought it'd be kind of funnier than it was, but most of them are like black and white films, like Saturday Night, Sunday Morning, or Billy Liar, or The Sporting Life. They're all great films, but they're really dark. Like I said,
Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner one too.
that was one too. Yeah. L-shaped room. I just want to get one. I want to get one of these going, and this is one of the later ones. And I thought it'd be kind of nice bridge between a normal type film and like.
I was looking forward to seeing this again. I really was.
Me too.
And I was startled by my own reaction to it, I think.
Does Gloom Girl still like it?
Yeah, good question.
She did not watch it with me, but
okay.
she understands where I'm coming from. Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I could see. You know,
I understand you.
I understand where you're coming from too, Chris. I guess I'm just not as sensitive as you on this particular.
Now, I was
Whoa.
surprised by how how I got like viscerally, like I had to keep getting up and leaving the room.
I mean, it disturbed me, especially his word "it" and some of the.
Oh, man.
that was hard to take.
But I
Actually, it did piss me off up until the point where he bonds with his son. And then I was willing to cut him some slack.
Yeah.
And then after that, I just saw it as a dark comedy.
Well, I saw him as a character, and so I accepted that character for who he was.
Mhm.
And so, even though I didn't like the character, or I should say, part of me hated a huge part of him, and part of me liked a part of him. So I think it didn't age as well as probably, some films, but I still got a lot from it, and I think it's a really, really good film.
Yeah,
I tell you, I was a little so Lewis Gilbert went on to do I think 3 Bond movies.
Well, yeah.
Right before or right after this movie, and it's like, here you go, like one of the biggest misogynistic characters in cinema history. And
You know what?
Did any of Alfie creep their way in? No, not one.
No, if you've ever read any of those books, they tone it down for the movies.
No.
Yeah, I know.
But, 007,
Yeah, I've read
James
all of them, Tad.
James Bond is Alfie with money and a job.
Pretty much.
And the ability to kill anyone he wants to kill.
Yeah,
And
that's
he can
shitty
fight and
job,
kill
too.
people.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I guess thumbs.
Two big thumbs up.
All right, good enough. Fantastic. Well, Chris,
Speaking
you're
of James
Right, well, it's
Bond,
done. John?
My issue is not with the movie, the filmmaking, the lighting, the cinematography, the performances. It's just my issue is with that character.
I'll say,
Right.
hold on. I just want to say one thing real quick, though,
Go ahead.
because you've pulled this card on me before. That means the movie was super effective.
You know,
Maybe, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's the same. It's when we watched that bleak Texas movie, and I said that I didn't want
Last
to.
Picture Show.
Yes,
Right.
yeah,
you know that
means it worked.
It worked.
No, you're correct.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a good
I
point.
had a real visceral reaction to this character.
Good movie, bad enjoyment.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
John?
No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
John didn't do a thumb. He's gonna go like this.
All right. Okay.
No, you have to crank it up. You have to go.
I'm not in a hurry to watch that again.